Christ is risen.
Indeed he is risen.
Christos voskres. Christos anesti. Eighth day of the feast, we celebrate Thomas. We also celebrate the great martyr George today. It's interesting that the Orthodox Church doesn't have anybody named George anymore, but I think of the late George Turchick, who was a member of our parish for many years, a good friend, who passed away several years ago. But the great martyr George didn't happen until 3 centuries later. Today we're talking about Thomas, who has come down through history as doubting Thomas, a name which, as you know, or don't know, I think is inaccurate. Because every one of the apostles doubted. Not one of them believed. Even the women themselves didn't really quite believe it at first. But every disciple, every apostle, did not believe the women when they told them. So Thomas was not unique. They believed when they saw him. Thomas didn't see him. What Thomas saw, he believed. However, the church uses this episode, and it calls Thomas's faith in the resurrection the beautiful unbelief of Thomas. Why? Because it certifies the resurrection through this story. This episode in the life of the risen Christ. He came, and it's interesting because he 3 times in today's gospel account, we have our Lord saying, "Peace be with you," which is the same exact words I use in the Divine Liturgy. Peace be with you, because the resurrection, the first fruits of the resurrection, are peace in our hearts and in our souls and our minds, knowing that we can conquer this world, that death has been destroyed, sin has been overcome. And from that knowledge, from that faith, there is peace. There should be peace and tranquility within our hearts, knowing that these things will trump all things. But Thomas comes forward, and Thomas was always very blunt during this entire gospel account. Thomas was a straight shooter. When they were questioning whether they should go back to Jerusalem, Thomas said, "Let's go and go die with him." Thomas was not a man of diplomacy. Thomas was, saying, "I won't believe it until I put my hands into, I can be sure." He was afraid that the rest of the apostles were just getting hysterical. And so he confirmed the resurrection of our Lord. And as I said before, I've always loved this gospel account because I always feel like Christ is reaching out through the ages to us. Because Thomas, you have believed. And he could have said that to all the apostles. You believe because you saw me. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. He's talking about each one of us who yell and scream and proclaim Christ is risen. We haven't seen the risen Christ physically, and yet we believe. So our Lord's blessing comes through this gospel account. He's talking directly to us. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. The great martyr George knew that Christ was risen. It was 3 centuries later. We are now 20 centuries later. We know Christ is risen. We know that the resurrection is reality. We know that thanks to the beautiful unbelief of Thomas, we know because of the preaching of the apostles, that this event took place. No matter how hard they tried to wipe it out in Soviet Ukraine, in Soviet Russia, the people still proclaimed Christos voskres. They would never be able to be put down. They were subjected to hours of atheistic propaganda. On Pascha itself, they gathered the people together by bayonet into town square to make them listen to atheistic propaganda for hours. And then after a couple hours, the presenter, saw some old man. He goes, "You stupid old man, ignorant old man, what do you have to say to this?" And the old man would say, "Christos voskres." And the multitudes answered, "Voice to voskres." You cannot destroy that kind of faith. You cannot destroy the faith that elevates us. Without the resurrection, we are just slime of the earth. Because our Lord took on our human form, took on our human suffering, and elevated and conquered sin, we share in that resurrection. It's not only Christ's resurrection we are celebrating, we are also, by acknowledging and having faith in his resurrection, we acknowledge and proclaim our own belief in our resurrection. Christos voskres.